My next guest is a Facebook vice president and one of the most powerful women in the UK tech industry. But back in 2016, Nicola Mendelssohn's life changed when she was told she had an incurable type of blood cancer. Well, now Nicola is launching a new charity, the Follicular Lymphoma Foundation, to help raise funds for research into a little-known cancer. Let's face it, Nicola joins me now. Nicola, hello.
Hi.
Follicular lymphoma. You've got one of the biggest jobs in the world. You've got a big family. You felt a lump, you went to the doctors, and all of a sudden, you knew this term, you knew this type of cancer. Talk to me about the diagnosis and what happened.
Well, first off, thanks for having me on. And you're right, nobody's ever heard of this cancer. Nobody can even say this cancer, follicular lymphoma. But it was actually 3 years ago to the day that I first discovered a lump in my groin and didn't think much of it. But I called my doctor and she basically said, well, if it hasn't gone in a couple of weeks, come and see me. And so I did go and see her and she sent me to another doctor. And so begins, if you like, the conveyor belt of diagnosis. And actually, unusually for blood cancers, I was actually diagnosed within a week. I had a CT scan, I had a biopsy, and then I was told I had follicular lymphoma. And it's often that with blood cancers, you can get symptoms. I didn't have any apart from a lump. Sometimes you can have night sweats, you can lose weight, you can feel tired. And as a woman, you can often get them, you know, don't worry, that's the menopause or something like that. It wasn't the case for me. The case for me was that I was diagnosed in a week. And then I had that moment of, well, you know, in your head when you hear cancer, you think, well, I've just got to beat this now. I'm going to blast it.
What's the treatment plan?
Yeah, cut it out. Exactly. And actually with this cancer and other blood cancers, there's an option where you can just watch and wait and see what happens for a while, where the doctors monitor you. But there's no point in actually treating you early because they can't cure you. And so they try and hold back the treatments for a later date, which is what I did.
Incurable, watch and wait. What does that actually mean? Because at the moment, after 3 years, you're in remission, but presumably because it's incurable, the danger of it coming back never leaves.
Yeah, that's right. So it was actually, I did watch and wait for 18 months. And then last summer I had a scan that showed that it was growing really near my kidneys. And they said at some point it would give me kidney failure. So I took the decision then with the doctors that I would need to have chemotherapy and immunotherapy, which I did for 6 months. That's what put me into remission. Or the technical thing is no evidence of disease. Now, the cancer is still there. It's still mutated on a microscopic level. And at any point, it could flare back up. It could be a year, it could be a week, it could be 10 years. There's not enough research and knowledge to know at this point how the path will be.
Yeah, the foundation wants to make the invisible visible, raise awareness of the symptoms, get more research into it, because I suppose the assumption is because it's very rare, there's not a lot of money that goes into finding a cure.
Yeah, that's right. I think blood cancers on the whole have got quite a low awareness, although together they're the 5th largest cancer killer in this country. And in the last couple of years, there was only £9 million spent on these 50, 60 different cancers. So, of course, you're not going to find a cure if there's so little money going in. You know, so that's why I wanted to make a concerted effort to set up this foundation, to set up the charity, and ultimately, hopefully, to find a cure, not for the hundreds of thousands of people that are living with this all over the world.
Nicola, you're a very impressive woman. We talk about you being, you know, one of the biggest people in tech outside of Silicon Valley. So you have one of the biggest jobs in the world. You have a big family. You've got 4 children of various different ages, a husband. Your schedule is, oh gosh, time to the minute throughout the year. Talk to me on a personal level about what it was like to get this diagnosis and be told it was incurable. How did that put your life into perspective?
Look, it was a massive shock. I mean, it was a physical shock as much as an emotional shock. I can sort of still feel it, that moment. All the cliches that people talk about, how you sort of feel sick to your stomach. And your life sort of flashes by you, and all sort of the dreams and hopes that you saw and you imagined, because, you know, you kind of think you're a bit invincible, don't you? And then suddenly, you see that it really, there's a different future there. And that first weekend was horrendous. It was very, very dark, very difficult. A lot of crying. Lost half a stone in weight and just crying and worrying and stress. And not telling anyone, because I didn't want to tell anyone until I knew exactly what the...
Because wasn't it your son's 18th that weekend?
Yeah,
as well?
It was coming up for his 18th, so I wanted to let him have a nice 18th birthday and not worry about what this was all going to mean. But I actually took a look at my life as well and thought, actually, I'm very lucky and I'm very blessed. to have the things that I do have, that I am supported by a great family, a great husband, that I do love my job. And so I thought, that's not how I'm going to approach this cancer. I'm going to do it in a different way.
Well, this is what earned you the tag Superwoman, because obviously, well, when your diagnosis became public, you were very open with your employer's Facebook about what you were dealing with. And they said, take as much time as you need, as any good employer would. But you decided the best course of action for you was to carry on as normal, as it were, and keep your high-profile job to the same level that you had before. Why did you decide to do that? Because a lot of people would have said, you need to take a step back, reassess, recover, let your body heal. What was your motivation?
Yeah, I think it's a really personal thing. And as I say, I love my job. I really enjoy what I do. And so to have that in a way taken away from me would be, well, you know, what are you doing? Like stripping me of all these different things. And I didn't want the cancer to define my life. It's not that I haven't made changes. I have made a couple of changes in terms of my diet and exercise and things like that. But I didn't want to lose all the things that part define me as well.
And in terms of living with it day to day, as I said, as we sit here, you're in remission now, which is great news. But how do you deal with it day to day?
So I get strength from this from a Facebook group that I'm in called Living with Follicular Lymphoma, and there's 6,000 people in that group now. And so you've got people at different stages of the journey. And I remember when I first joined the group, and there was somebody in there that had been in remission for 10 years. And you thought, how is that possible? You know, it's incurable. How can you be there? And they talked in this post about some days they don't even think about it at all anymore. I thought, that can't be possible. You know, when you see the word cancer, it's so front and centre. But actually, sometimes I don't think of it every day, and then I sort of remind myself and go, oh, it is still there. So I think it is possible. I mean, it definitely takes the ability to compartmentalise one thing versus another. But, you know, on the good days, I don't think about it, and the bad days, I try and stop the mind wandering to, you know, the bad things as to what could or might happen. I try not to go there.
Yeah. There's pressure on employees, isn't there, in a company, whether it's small, medium, or huge like Facebook, to keep their personal life away from work. There's a lot of pressure of that. By you putting it out there and being very open about your diagnosis and what you were dealing with, do you think that's helped other people, not just, you know, employees, but businesses as well, to see that, you know, something like this can happen to an employee and it can be managed? You should be more open.
Yeah, I hope so. And actually, I've had a lot of correspondence from people telling me that actually gave them the kind of the encouragement to go and share their stories. I had one girlfriend who I didn't know had breast cancer, but had been hiding it from everybody, including her employer. And I said, what? And then she came and sort of whispered and told me. And I said, well, what are you worrying about? And she said, well, I was worrying about whether they would fire me, which I guess is a real worry. And of course, most people are not like that. Most people are human. And it's actually, how can we help, is the thing that actually people turn around. And I do think there is a taboo around illness. I really think that's true in the workplaces. And certainly at Facebook, one of the things that we encourage people is be your true, authentic self. If you're trying to put masks on top of your, you know, what you're doing anyway, you're never going to be the best version of you. So I would always opt for being open and transparent.
Did you find that anybody treated you differently? Yeah,
some people in the early days would come up to me and they just look sad at you. They sort of tilt the head at you and sort of nodding as though you're about to die. And I'm like, and then you sort of make apologies to them, going, don't worry, I'm okay right now. But on the whole, I've just found that people have been really helpful and just really lovely. And they take their guide from you as to how you act. And sometimes people say, I'm really sorry I've not mentioned it. It's like, that's fine. Yeah. That's okay not to mention it.
You want to have some sense of normality at work, don't you? You want to get on with it. At home, what's that been like? Because we touched on your children there, and we've got a gentleman coming in later on who's written a book. It's Child Grief Awareness Week this week, about how to talk to children about uncomfortable subjects like that. What was that like for you?
It was hard. I definitely did research beforehand as to any advice that I could, how you tell children that mum's got cancer. It was hard. What we decided to do, John and I, is to actually bring the kids together and tell them all together in one go rather than doing individual conversations. It was, yeah, it was the hardest conversation I've ever had.
And now you're keeping that dialogue going with them, because obviously it's always on their minds as well as yours.
Yeah, it is. And they've said things like, we forget that you've got it, Mum, because you seem normal and you seem like you're just out there. But every now and then, and you know, especially this week launching the foundation, it's very present and front and centre. But I guess it's part of all of our lives now, and the kids are in a good place.
We've been juggling incurable cancer, setting up this foundation, family life, one of the biggest jobs in the world, as I've said. Your role at Facebook is pretty full on. And as you are battling this, there have been a lot of battles to fight at Facebook as well, because while you were having a turbulent time, so is the company in its evolving standpoint on things like fake news, harmful content and data security. So you've got to keep on top of all of this as well. I wonder if we could just talk a little bit about political advertising. You'll have seen a few weeks ago Twitter announcing that there was going to be a blanket ban on political advertising, a blackout, which is the polar opposite of what seems to be Facebook's approach, which is a anything goes policy. What do you think the right approach is?
So I just want to be clear that we don't have an anything goes policy. We've got really clear rules or community standards that anything that goes on our platform, whether it's advertising or organic, has to adhere to. That said, we do allow political advertising on our platform, which is different to Twitter. The reason for that is that we believe that in an election or in any given period, people want to have the opportunity to be able to discuss and debate and to scrutinise what politicians are saying. And I think that in a democracy, they don't really want a private company to be saying what should and shouldn't be put out by politicians. So we think it should be put out there, and then people can debate and discuss it. What we think is also important is that if politicians are doing advertising with us, they have to register with us first. And then it's labelled on the top when you see the ads when they come in your newsfeed that it comes from that political party. And the transparency comes by the fact that we then take all those ads and we put them in an ads library. Anybody can go and check out that ads library at any point. And actually in this election, it's the first time we're seeing it being used, where you can actually see what ads are being targeted at who and how much is being spent.
Do you think that policy, your ad policy, will evolve more? Because the one problem, I suppose, with the Facebook ad library is it could be more transparent. It shows you how much is being spent, but it doesn't show you where it's being spent, who's being targeted, how they're targeting those people using Facebook. And also fact-checking ads as well. So parties can put up an advertisement and it goes completely unchallenged.
Okay, so there's a few different parts in that question. First off, within the ads library, you can go and you can see who it's being targeted at. And actually, we're the only platform that actually offers that sort of transparency. If you want to, there's nowhere that you can go and see what the leaflets are being put through people's doors or what adverts were running in the press or even in posters, even last week. So all this now exists in Facebook and will be there for 7 years. So you can constantly go back and check and see what people are doing. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud that, that we're doing that. But as there's always more that we can be doing, and we're always iterating on our platforms as well. So I'm pleased with the progress we're making there.
Well, but what about the fact that a political party could go on and put a video that has outright lies? I think, news outlets, for example, Sky News is under more scrutiny than ever before for accountability, fact-checking, balance. And it seems that politicians' parties on Facebook can say whatever they want unchecked again. And I think people have a problem with that. If you see something on Facebook, how do you know that it's true?
So if there's anything on there that could cause real-world harm or could impact in any way the people going out to vote, that would come down. That would have no place on our platform. We want to be really clear about that. If something has been labelled in the past as misinformation, that couldn't be used in advertising. But other than that, yes, it could be out there. And then part of that is what we see happens anyway in the natural course of an election, is that people will discuss it, people will debate it. And then what it does is allows the public to form proper, full opinions of the different messages that different political parties are putting out there.
Deep fakes is something I actually learned about first on Facebook, and it was a clip of a Saturday night talk show where a comedian's face had been replaced with Tom Cruise's face. And the technology was such that you couldn't notice the transition. And that's a real concern now, deep fakes, not just because of, light-hearted comedy moments, but in terms of, putting words in the mouths of people, that aren't true. What are Facebook doing to challenge deep fakes? Because, of course, that technology is extremely advanced and extremely new.
So one of the things that we're doing a lot more of is the investment that we're making into machine learning and artificial intelligence. And it is almost like, if you like, an arms race against the bad guys that, we'll bring in some tools and they'll move again, and so we will as well. We've also trebled the number of people that are working in this area around safety on our platforms to 35,000 people over the last couple of years as well. And the total sum of monies that we're spending in this whole area to combat these sorts of things, of misinformation, false news, is actually more than the total revenues of the business of Facebook when we went to IPO. So that's billions and billions of dollars, but we're not going to be satisfied. We know we've got to keep investing here because we know these things are important.
Talk about Facebook learning and evolving. Do you think Mark Zuckerberg will ever change his stance on political advertising? Because it is such a tricky issue in terms of, you know, people talk about free speech and people being able to make up their own minds, but it's so nuanced, a lot of political advertising. It's not outright lies, it's forming people's opinion and algorithms. And the way it gets to somebody is so complicated. Do you think that he will change his stance in terms of not an outright ban, but have more stricter rules in the future?
I think where we are is where we are at the moment. And what I see, though, and the reason it really matters and it's important, is because it also gives voice to the smaller political parties that are trying to break through as well. You know, the big parties, they've got voice, they've got the reach. But actually the smaller parties, and especially, you know, in the election that we're seeing at the moment, I think people are very interested. And so you can't just ban for one and not the other. That's why we want to have that platform to allow all the parties to talk.
That's just a snapshot of the huge pressures you face at work and at home. We've talked about that. What's next for you? As we said, you're in remission, you're doing well, busy at work. What's next for Nicola Mendelsohn?
Well, I've never really looked at things like that. The way that I think about things is, am I still learning? Am I enjoying what I'm doing? And then, well, then I'm a lucky person.
Well, Nicola, you certainly are. It's been really interesting to talk to you, learn more about follicular lymphoma. Good luck with the foundation. Thank you for talking to us about the many issues associated with Facebook at the moment as well. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.